to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. In my previous video, we talked about Shannon Ryan's performance this past weekend, advancing to a professional record of 7-0 opposite the ring Poland's own Jasmina Sopotnicka. Immediately afterwards, she called out Emma Dolan, who she was supposed to be fighting, saying she still wants to fight her, she still wants to fight, and just giving that fight a second look, if and when it happens. I feel that even though Shannon Ryan looked human this weekend, and I expected her to, she'll look a lot better with Emma Dolan. She'll look a lot better with Emma Dolan, not because Emma isn't a good fighter, but because styles make fights. It's the styles of the fighters that determine how the fights play out, how they look, and what the outcomes are. There are some differences between a Jasmina Sopotnicka and an Emma Dolan. Where Jasmina can handle herself mid-range to inside, and she has some speed of her own, Emma Dolan is a little bit more vulnerable at that range because she's very long, very rangy. She's not as fluid in the pocket as Jasmina, so if Shannon Ryan is doubling and tripling up on the jab as she closes the distance to get inside on Emma, it's going to be harder for Emma to deal with that than it was for Jasmina.
She'll be flustered.
Because she's got those long arms. Those long arms, mid-range to inside, it's harder for them to string punches together because they need more room to work than a shorter, more compact fighter, a tight fighter like a Shannon Ryan with speed.
Mobility.
Athleticism, that shorter, stumpier fighter with a lower center of gravity who's fast on their feet. I don't doubt for a second that Shannon Ryan is going to be able to get inside on Emma Dolan if and when she does, if they fight, Emma Dolan could be in a world of trouble. Not dissimilar from what you used to see with Mike Tyson in his heyday. He was a lot shorter, a lot stockier than his contemporaries, but he was also faster on his feet, much more devastating mid-range to inside than what taller and longer fighters were around in his era. It's like that with Shannon. She's a shorter fighter with a lower center of gravity, so she won't be often off balance. If anything, the taller, longer fighter will be off balance, trying to keep her out and trying to manage the distance. Thus, if the Emma Dolan fight is rescheduled, and they do yet another battle of the unbeatens for Shannon, I think Shannon wins that fight. I think she wins it in better, more decisive fashion than this past weekend's fight. This past weekend's fight seems to have been for a lesser version of a WBA title, the WBA International title, I believe it was, with the end game being getting the WBA champion, the full WBA champion in the ring. And at super flyweight, the full WBA champion is Clara Lescurat, an unbeaten Argentinian slugger that comes from a somewhat decent amateur background. I think Clara is a strong fighter, a durable fighter, though not much more experienced as a professional than Shannon Ryan. Clara is about 9-0, whereas Shannon is catching up. She's about 7-0. Well, I know there's more to boxing than what you see on paper, but just as professionals, it's not like Clara Lescurat is vastly more experienced than Shannon Ryan. She isn't. She doesn't have that many more fights than she does. Clara is a tough Argentinian slugger, durable, strong, fluid, mid-range to inside, but not as fast as Shannon Ryan and not as athletic. Those are Shannon's primary weapons in a potential fight with a Clara Lescurat, that she's noticeably faster and lighter on her feet. In terms of strength and single punching power, I don't think there's much between them, but I also don't think Shannon should turn it into a dogfight, try to go blow for blow with Clara Lescurat. She's got to play at the angles, hit her in the blind spots, use her speed, her mobility. Change levels and diversify your offense. Don't make yourself a stationary target. Don't make yourself predictable.
Monotonous.
Shannon is a special fighter, is what she is. She's very special, and she makes me proud to be from Watford.
You're not from Watford.
It's not the point. The point is that Shannon Ryan is talented enough, here and now, at only 7-0, that she's not that far off from becoming a world champion, that another fighter might actually need a lot more development, a lot more bring along, whereas Shannon's almost ready. She's almost ready. First Emma Dolan, And then maybe Clara Lescurat. Then maybe. Say 2 more fights. You get her the Emma Dolan fight, you reschedule that, maybe 1 more afterwards, just for good measure, then you see about getting Clara in the ring. It's the advantage of having a major promotional outfit behind you like Matchroom and a capable managerial outfit like 258 Management behind you. They can make those big fights happen almost as soon as you want them. Shannon Ryan is on the cusp of becoming the face of the super flyweight division. I think she can do it. Minimum, I'm looking forward to finding out. In men's super lightweight news, a look back, Teofimo Lopez won, but it wasn't pretty. Where does he go from here?
Back to the drawing board, I'd say.
I mean, the only thing we've got to do, I guess, is double up, triple up on the jab, maybe on the shifting. Lopez 26 told ESPN afterwards, I blocked his jab. I was trying to draw my jabs as much as I could at those moments, but he was running. He was staying off range a lot. Even when I doubled, he wasn't there. He was just running off to the sides. This style presents such issues for Lopez doesn't bode well for a potential matchup against Devine Haney, ESPN's number 6 ranked pound-for-pound boxer. Haney is a masterful boxer who is adept to controlling the range with his jab, and though he isn't a southpaw, he's a far better boxer than Sandor Martin or Jermaine Ortiz, both of which gave Lopez a lot of issues with their lateral movement.
They smoked him out is what they did.
It's one way to look at it. A fighter like Teofimo Lopez, who likes to hang back and let the opponent come to him so he can punch him in between, catch him with a hard counter, is drawn out by the lateral movement of a Sandor Martin, the lateral movement of a Jermaine Ortiz. It puts Lopez in a position where he has to give chase and, in effect, becomes more vulnerable, though some capitalize more off that vulnerability than others.
I don't think Jermaine Ortiz did enough.
Aside from highlighting a deficiency I was already aware of, that Teofimo hanging back and setting up counters is alright, but coming forward on the front foot, he's not as good. Another option, of course, is to avoid these types of opponents altogether, movers and jabbers. Lopez claimed he was retired following his dominant victory over Tosh Jailer back in June to capture the Lineal Junior Welterweight Championship. And make no mistake, Taylor is a top-level fighter whom Lopez beat up in convincing fashion, but he really is the opposite of a Jermaine Ortiz. He really is the opposite of a Sandor Martin. Where those guys circle away from the pocket, he moves towards it.
He's a lot more aggressive than those fighters are, which plays into Teofimo Lopez's hands, his strengths.
I don't even know why I came back to this, honestly, Lopez said. Seriously, why did I come back to this? Nobody wants to fight. Everybody just wants to clout the name out of all of my hard work. They just want to be famous.
Does he have a point? Jermaine Ortiz, in spending the majority of the fight on his bike, did he come to fight or did he come to survive?
I don't really care at this point because that wasn't a fight tonight, Lopez said. That was just a sparring session. That's just me chasing a chicken. The kind of opponent Lopez really needs is Subriel Matias. The Puerto Rican volume puncher isn't hard to find inside the ring. He would surely pressure Lopez and make for the sort of fight and style Lopez craves. They've exchanged some words on social media, and it's the perfect matchup to show off Lopez's elite talent once again. But another slick southpaw. There's no point in such a matchup anytime soon. It's pure boxers that give Teofimo issues. It's pure boxers and outside fighters, movers that give him problems. But guys that come forward and guys that are aggressive, those are the guys he looks best against.
Boxer punches have a tactical edge over pressure fighters, that's why.
Whereas pure boxers, outside fighters, and movers have a tendency to make boxer punchers look bad. Think Devin Haney versus Regis Prograis.
Danielito Zorrilla versus Regis Prograis.
In this instance, Jermaine Ortiz versus Teofimo Lopez. Jermaine, who says, hopefully we get the rematch with Lopez. I'll make it more of a clear decision.
How does he do that?
The fans, the boxing fans will know, you know? Ortiz told a group of reporters, you guys know, my team knows, the world that's seen the fight knows. BoxRec and history will say that he won, but hopefully we get the rematch on, and I'll make it a more clear decision the second time around.
He didn't do enough for me.
He managed to outland Lopez by a narrow margin in 5 out of the 12 rounds, in 5 out of the 12. But in 4 out of the 12, they landed the same number of punches. They landed the same number of shots, according to CompuBox. And if you're Jermaine Ortiz, You don't want that. You don't want it to be that close because then he might get consideration.
Those are rounds the judges might swing to him. Neither one of you is getting all that much done, but he's the champion and you're the challenger. He might get consideration. In fact, he did.
Teofimo only managed to outland Jermaine Ortiz in 3 out of the 12 rounds, 3 out of the 12. But with the 4 rounds where they landed the same number of shots, you could see what the problem is. It's marginal. It's too close.
If you're Jermaine Ortiz, you need it to be decisive. You need it to be emphatic.
I'm disturbed because I knew what I had to do from the Lomachenko fight in this fight, and I had to finish off strong, Ortiz said. And I felt like I did that. I didn't feel like Teofimo got to outland me or, hurt me at any point during the fight or land any big shots like Lomachenko did in that fight in the ending of the rounds where some of the rounds could have been swinged around. This wasn't like that. It was a one-way fight for me. He says that Teofimo didn't land any big shots, and Teofimo never hurt him.
But when did you hurt Teofimo?
When did you hurt him? See, that's the problem. You're putting all the responsibility on one fighter.
Just one.
When the responsibility is on the both of you to land meaningful shots, meaningful punches, with the difference being that he's the champion and you're the challenger.
Are you expecting to get the same consideration as the champion? Because I know it's not ideal. I know it's not idealistic, but things are seldom ever ideal in the sport of boxing. That's why when you're the challenger, you have to work harder, as hard as you can.
You don't know what the judges are going to favor. Your defense or his offense, his aggression or your mobility. You don't know that. But what you do know is if you're landing more punches than he is in a round frequently,
As often as possible.
that sends the judges more of a message than just making Teofimo miss while staying on the perimeter of the ring. He just wanted to fight, Ortiz replied when asked what Lopez said to him in the ring. But like I said the whole week, he gets frustrated. He can't control himself. He can't tame himself. I'm calm. I know how to control myself, and I knew he couldn't do that. That was the game plan. Get him out of his game plan. Get him frustrated. And that's exactly what it was. He was throwing wild and was making him...
I was making him miss. It was part of the game plan the whole time, and the game plan worked.
It's not moving along the perimeter of the ring that costed Ortiz the fight. It's not boxing on the outside and sticking and moving that costed him the fight. It's the lack of output. A better version of the fight that he fought is the fight that Anthony Joshua fought in the Andy Ruiz rematch, because he was sticking and moving and boxing on the outside.
And you never thought throughout the course of the fight that Anthony's not doing enough. The same applies to Sonny Edwards' outside fight with Maruti Mitterlane for what was the IBF title. You never thought throughout the course of that fight that Sonny needs to do more. Whereas with Jermaine Ortiz and Teofimo Lopez in the second half, that's exactly what I was thinking.
So if there is to be a rematch between them, Jermaine Ortiz needs to show more. He needs to do more. It's not enough to circle on the perimeter of the ring making Lopez miss. You have to make him pay. You have to make it clear, apparent, and decisive. Because if you don't, that leaves the door open for interpretation.
You don't want that.
Men's heavyweight news. On the heels of his most recent loss, former WBC champion Deontay Wilder says it was a boring fight. Nothing really happened. I went right back to training the next day. He really didn't do nothing. They just went off.
If he really didn't do nothing, what the hell did you do?
The little flurries or whatever. In the training for that, I had to travel 2 times, 20 hours of traveling, and those guys were already in Europe. They were only 2 to 3 hours away. I'm not complaining, I'm just saying what I had to go through. What did you have to go through?
What?
That you had to fly to Saudi Arabia for the fight? You knew that ahead of time. It's you and your team's job to map out the schedule so you're not tired or jet-lagged during the fight. I mean, all of that is on you.
The same way your 2 losses to Tyson Fury are on you, because he wasn't your mandatory challenger. You didn't owe him a title shot. You prioritized that fight over the Joshua fight, the undisputed title tilt, and you got what you got.
You thought after sitting out most of last year, you could just dust yourself off and take on a former champion like yourself and Joseph Parker. No fuss, no muss, I'll knock him out. The right hand will avail me the way it always avails me. And that didn't happen because at Deontay Wilder's age and having sat out as long as he sat out, that affects your timing, that affects your reflexes. your response time.
He's also predictable. I mean, everybody knows going into a fight with Deontay that he's going to look to land the right hand.
His offensive arsenal really is limited to the straight right hand or the right cross. He doesn't have much of a jab or a tight left hook, an uppercut up the middle. He doesn't have much else outside of the right hand. This is what Joseph Parker knew going in, fighting at a slight crouch, bending at the waist and knees, making himself a small target, a tricky target.
Deontay Wilder not being fluent in inside fighting. He's no good mid-range to inside, that if you can get close to him, he'll get flustered.
For the exact same reason I said Emma Dolan might be flustered with Shannon Ryan in the pocket, mid-range to inside, because Emma Dolan, she's got very long arms. Deontay has very long arms, and it's harder for him to fight an opponent at close range. It's the shorter, stumpier fighter with the shorter arms that has the advantage in the pocket. In this situation, that was Joseph Parker, because the punches don't have to travel as far, and the guy with shorter arms at that range doesn't need as much room to work. The taller, longer fighter does.
That's why it's the taller, longer fighter's responsibility to manage the distance at which the fight is being fought so the shorter fighter doesn't get in close. But Deontay Wilder's never had good coordination, a good feet, good balance.
To manage the distance, box and punch, box and move, use the ring. Don't just let the guy get close to you. He can only really manage that with a certain level of opponent, but against a former champion like himself, his deficiencies were once again exposed.
The first former champion to do it was Tyson Fury in the first two fights, then again in the third, and Joseph Parker is the second.
It's not a coincidence that when you step up Deontay Wilder in class against former champions like himself, he can't stay in character. He doesn't look the part. It's not a coincidence. It's the truth.
Coming to the light.
What's that bring the excuse count to? I heard him mention something about ayahuasca killing his killer instincts and how he needs to get him back. So what was it? Was it that he was jet-lagged, or was it the ayahuasca?
There's always an excuse with this guy.
I heard something about Deontay Wilder potentially returning to action in March, but that news hasn't been made official. The only big show going down in March is the Joshua versus Ngannou fight, but he hasn't been added to that show as of yet. On the PBC side of things, the only card they've got going down in March is towards the end of March, the Zoo versus Thurman fight.
And beyond that, they haven't announced any other shows.
Who's a safe enough opponent for Deontay Wilder to get himself back in the winner's bracket? I mean, who's a safe enough guy for Wilder to get back in the winner's bracket, to get a win in the column?
Coming off a loss in his late 30s.
Being honest with you, I can't think of too many safe choices for Deontay Wilder. Looking at today's landscape at heavyweight off the top of my head, they would have to find him a journeyman or a fringe contender. I don't know, maybe Riyad Murhi? He just retired Olympic gold medalist Tony Yoka. Maybe Wilder can fight him?
I don't know.
I get the sense that Wilder's doing whatever he's doing and saying whatever he's saying for appearance's sake. He doesn't want to bow out like this off a loss, but he may not have a choice. There are not that many safe fights left out there for him.
This was all intended to be a segue to a long-awaited, long-anticipated Anthony Joshua showdown, but Wilder couldn't hold up his end of the bargain, and he was favored to do so.
But he didn't.